All right. So folks will probably continue to trickle in, but given that this is only 30 minutes, there's really you can't cover a lot of ground in 30 minutes. There's one topic we're going to cover here. I'm going to sort of give a technical example. We'll have a few minutes for questions and then we'll be gone. So I do expect folks to continue coming in. I didn't set up a wait room, so folks can just pile in. My name's Gift Constable. Thanks for joining me. I could see a few faces that know me already, and probably a lot of you don't. In terms of just my background, I'm not going to dwell on this a great deal, but I've spent time over 30 years in technology in a bunch of different contexts, from doing startups to managing software at sort of scale with millions of users using an internet product, to even creating new products and doing innovation for very, very large companies. And along the way, I've written a couple books on entrepreneurship and innovation that are used pretty broadly around the world. And that's all I'm going to say for now. I've got two classes on Maven. One is kicking off actually pretty soon, financial fluency for product leaders. And then in September, and this one's a very small cohort, only 10 people. You have to apply to be part of this one. It's this product leadership class where this is for people who are either already managing people. You can be in design, product management, or engineering. But you're either already managing people or you're about to be. And we role play a bunch of complicated scenarios over 6 weeks. So these are my classes that you can find on Maven if you're interested. The context for today's little hit and run session is this: you're the chief product officer at your company. My context is usually software. I don't know what business you're in, um, and so you're in your weekly leadership meeting, and the CEO and the CMO all of a sudden tell you, now you've been working, your product teams have been working on getting some new exciting features out the door. It doesn't matter what industry, doesn't matter what the features are, but that's coming. And they tell you in your leadership team meeting that they're excited about this and they want to do a blitz, a marketing blitz, spend a bunch of money, do some demand gen, drive some users into the platform, and get people on, take advantage of this new launch and get them on the new feature. All right, so that's our context. Now, in your head, right, you're thinking, oh, golly, okay, like, yeah, we're going to be launching this feature on time, but to hit that date, it's not going to be as battle tested as we want. So I was really hoping to do a private beta here. We're probably going to have some design flaws. We're just going to learn a bunch of stuff because it's going to be brand new. And so what you want to do is take 8 weeks and iterate this in private with some invitation, so invite only people and get it more battle tested, get it really ready, and then sort of explode, then pour on the gas. But you don't have a lot of hard quantitative data to make your case as to why you're right and they're wrong. So, in the meeting, right, maybe you convince them that it's best to hold off that big marketing blitz. Maybe they convince you that it's actually best to do it. That's easy, right? Okay, everyone's aligned. You've made a decision, go. What I want to talk about here is when it doesn't quite work out that way, because when we practice and when we think about sort of leadership, we got to think about the hard situations. And so what happens in your hard situation? In your meeting, the CFO sort of says, when you express your hesitation and that you prefer to delay the marketing, they say, hold on a second, don't you have confidence in your people? Like, you've got the most expensive people in the entire company, right? Like, aren't they good enough to put out a good product? You've said you're going to hit this date. And the chief marketing officer says to you, look, we're behind in our numbers. Like, we have to get going. The further we wait, the harder it's going to be to hit our goals, the more pressure we're going to be on as a business. You're going to be improving the product as we go. Let's just get them in the door. Let's get them hooked. And then you make things better. So you hear that. You're not going to get into a big argument there, right? You got to think about, okay, what do I do with this situation? As a chief product officer, what are the jobs to be done here in this context? One, you want to get to the right answer, right? You're trying to get to the best guess. You don't have a lot of hard data on this. You have sort of informed intuition, and that's what everyone's going by. And they're bringing their different perspectives to the table. But together, you want to come up with the best guessed answer for the company, not for what's right for you, but on your product team, but for the company. That's one. Number two is you want to align with your C-suite teammates, right? The phrase that gets used very commonly is, once you become at the executive level, like the C-suite is your first team. It's not the product team or the engineering team. It's the C-suite that's your first team. So you got to stay aligned with that. And you want to do it in a way that avoids a battle of egos and keeps people from being defensive. There's a little tool that I think it's underused, and that's what I wanted to show today as a quick example. And then again, as I say, we'll then open it up to discussion. And that's creating a little mini model, just creating a little mini model to not to give the answer, but to actually be a tool for a discussion. So I'm going to hop out of slides here, and I'm going to show an example of what I'm talking about, of what I might do in this situation. You know, I'll always start with a blank spreadsheet. My belief, and this is my recommendation, is that what you're trying to do when you've got a situation like this, you're making a decision about something that's going to happen in the future that's going to lead to good or bad business results. You're prognosticating, right? You're making a forecast. And you're thinking through a system. How's it going to work? You don't want to, if you use someone else's template, you think through how they think the system works, but you want to sort of get to first principles and think through what do you believe about the system. And the first thing to do, and by the way, I'll share a link both on those previous slides that you could take a screenshot of it, but I'll share it in chat as well. So if you want to go play with this mini model, it's a little toy, but it's useful. The first thing that I will do when I start is I'll just think about my assumptions and my inputs. What data do I have to work with? What guesses am I having to make? Like what's going to drive the system that I'm imagining here? Now, in this little example, let's assume that the CMO, the chief marketing officer, has said, look, I want to run this campaign for 2 months, and I think I could drive about 300,000 leads. You know, we're going to spend some real money here. This is exciting new features we're rolling out that people have been waiting for a long time. And let's say you've got a historical average of you've got a trial program as part of how people onboard to your product. So they come on, they could sign up for a trial, and then they become paid customers. So historically, you've been at 8%. You think, all right, maybe I'll start at 10%. But you're really worried that because the product's not ready, converting from trial to paid at the beginning is going to be really bad, really harsh. Right. And historically, let's say you're at 29%, you convert about a third of the people who are doing your trials, but you think we're going to be at 5%. But maybe once we've done some work, our improvement work, maybe we can get that up even better than normal. Maybe that can go up to 40%. You know, I need to know how much money I'm going to make so that I can actually tie this to our revenue impact as part of making a case here. Might need to know how long the trial is. Maybe I play with that, maybe I don't. And I need to know how long I'm going to be working on improving this thing. These are kind of, all right, if I just take a step back and imagine what are my ingredients, these are the kinds of things that I would do. And I'll just start creating a little mini model of what this is going to do. It's not really complicated, right? I'm not doing fancy Excel work. I've got a bunch of if statements here. Actually, the fanciest thing I've done is I've got a little offset formula because I want all these things to be live. If I change the trial length, I want it to know I need the people who signed up for the trials 2 months ago rather than 1 month ago, because that's when the purchase conversion point is going to be. But I can play with these numbers, right? I can play with these numbers and see what they do. And all I'm trying to do is create a little engine. And this engine isn't to give me the answer. This engine is actually to create a conversation with my counterparts, in particular, my counterpart in marketing. And so, you know, I'm going to design out a little scenario of, given these inputs, what happens, let's say over 12 months in terms of revenue, if we just do this upfront campaign that marketing and the CEO are pushing for, versus if we do this beta period and we delay everything for a little bit, right? And, you know, I might look at this and go, okay, I'm seeing a huge difference in terms of we're throwing away revenue by burning and churning people who are not converting from the trial into paid really early. But that's given my assumptions. All right, so let's take this, and now I'm going to sit down with the CMO. Now I'd probably tweak it a little bit just so that if we put this on a computer screen in front of us, it's easy for them to read. So you could see I've just sort of, you know, oh, by the way, all my inputs in spreadsheets are always blue, but I've just put little boxes on here and tried to make things clear. I'm probably not going down to this model right away. I might even hide it at the beginning. you have it in your back pocket. If you're talking with the CFO, chances are they're going to want to get to the model really fast. The CMO might not. But now we could sit down, we could have a conversation. And, and I could say, I've been thinking about this and I've sort of played out how it's going to work and I've run some numbers and, I'm really worried about what's going to happen. And with my worries, it's actually, there's a real disparity between how well we do revenue wise if we do this campaign right out the gate versus if we do a private beta program. But I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear what your assumptions are because you might disagree with some of my inputs. And they go, all right, because now you've invited them to the table, right? And now there are actually numbers to work with. People don't do math in their heads. They work on informed intuition a lot of the time, right? So now you're looking at this and they go, okay, like I see what you've conversion to trial. That seems reasonable to me. I think you're being way too harsh. This notion that we're going to drop from 30% to 5%. No, and you say, okay, let's make that 15. Is that workable? All right, we'll both work. And then they say, all right, you're being too aggressive here, 40%. Why don't we bring it down to our normal? Yeah, that's probably the pricing plan they're going to do this. Okay, this all sounds reasonable. Now what do we have? Okay, we've got this, we still have this difference, right? And remember, you could see here, I'm still doing a little bit of the math. So because people don't do math in their heads as to what's the difference between if we do the upfront campaign and not. I also added in my little model this number because I was thinking through how much money, if we converted people at our normal rate, how much money would we have gained versus how much money are we converting at the expected rate before we've made these product improvements. And I'm looking at this. I just wanted to do this math, and I could see, for these 2 months of inputs, we're basically throwing away. We're walking away from $1.5 million in ARR, right? That's just a number for me to have in the back of my head. And so now you're having a discussion that I go, all right, well, what happens if okay, let's give you more time to do your product work. Why don't we do this? We'll drive 200,000. So the same number of people total, same spend, but we'll do this over 3 months, right? And now it starts to look better. It starts to equal, all right? So I've created this little tool. Now, let's say you don't agree on these assumptions. You have really a difference of opinion as to what their inputs are and what your inputs are. There's a risk sometimes in doing these models as well that they sort of back into the number they want to see, right? And that can happen. And so you think, all right, I want to escalate this. Well, this is still a very useful a tool, right? You're going to escalate this to the CEO. You're going to sit down with the CEO and the CMO, and you're going to say, all right, we've got their version of what's going to happen. We've got my version of what's going to happen. Let's get your version of what's going to happen, right? And I might start with the inputs. This is 3 of us just sitting. We've put this up on the screen, or it's in front of us. And maybe I have this hidden. Maybe I show it, and we can play with what these inputs are. And you could have a conversation saying, look, the CMO is thinking that actually, whether we do a beta period or not, there's actually a pretty small difference. But I'm far more worried about our conversion from trial to paid, which means there's a pretty big spread. We're leaving a lot of money on the table. And right now you have this conversation. But again, now people are looking at the numbers. It's this malleable tool that you're able to have a conversation around, and you're listening to them and you're understanding what they're saying, but then it's turning into numbers so that you can make a more informed business decision. So, I didn't want to stop sharing. I'm going to flip back to just the slides for just a few final points on this stuff. The outcomes that can come out of using a tool like this is that you look at the numbers and you go, oh, my intuition was wrong. Actually, marketing is right. That's not a bad outcome, right? It may be that they look at the numbers and they go, oh, actually, I know I'm really anxious and I'm dying to get going, but we are going to drop a lot of revenue. Okay, let's be a little patient. It may be that you both look at the model and you go, okay, let's be smarter. Let's think of a better way forward, right? The idea before was we do this big demand gen campaign. Maybe we do a press campaign first. We don't drive people on the product. And then once the product's better, then we drive people. Or maybe it's, let's start with, spend only $10,000 a month. Let's like drip people in, ratchet that up to 100,000, and then we get to 500, but maybe we do this build over time. So maybe you find an interesting compromise path or better path forward. And it's quite possible that you also are technically right, theoretically right, but it's the right business decision to actually do it anyway, right? The CEO could look at this and go, yeah, you're right. We're actually going to leave some money on the table. It's going to hurt us revenue wise, but it's worth doing because we've got a competitor breathing down our neck, or I need to show our investors that we're making moves here, right? Those are important things. Those are perspectives that the CEO might have that you might not be thinking about, just thinking purely about the revenue and the conversion rates, right? But either way, you've created a little tool that helps people get out of intuition. It helps everyone get out of ego and defensiveness and like staking a hard position. It's a conversational tool. So the last thing I'll say before stopping here is you'll just notice a few things about this, right? This was not hard for me to build. It's just a very simple little tool. I kept it as simple as possible. I asked myself, am I making this, like everything in product, right? Keep it as simple as possible without making it too simple. I designed it for interaction, not for presentation, right? And these things are never about how fancy you can make your model. It's just about, do they help you make a better decision? Depending on the audience, right? I might show just the summary, or I might, and keep the model in my back pocket. And if you're changing the numbers, if you're changing the inputs during your conversations, just a word of advice, try to keep notes about like save your original numbers, have a version of that you've got, because you'll forget what they were, and write down why you're making changes, because you will forget. In the swirl of everything, you will forget, and that's really useful context. Now, we kind of did this here. I always recommend modeling out multiple scenarios. A model never gives you an answer. I mean, it can, but it shouldn't give you an answer, because that's not how future works, right? There's possibilities that happen. What a model is really good at is helping you flex a few key possibilities to then say, okay, if these things happen, here's what the results are. So having some scenarios of like worst, middle, best are really good. In this case, what kind of happened was we had two scenarios with the CMO's version of inputs and mine as the CPO. And then lastly, you'll note that this little model was just talking about revenue. It didn't talk about opportunity cost versus other things. It didn't talk about financial costs and the bottom line, but yours might, right? So that's, let's stop sharing here. That's the key thing in this little half an hour blip that I wanted to get across, of that this is a really useful tool. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it can be a very effective way to navigate some important disagreements, some important different points of view in a more productive way at the C-suite, and take the tension and the politics and the ego out and ground everyone in what's important. And sort of you're still working, you're making guesses, you're still working off intuition, but by then connecting the numbers, so that, because people are bad at doing that in their head, you can have aha moments, they'll have aha moments, and you work together better. So that's it for the presentation portion of this. I'd love to hear any questions or comments that people have. Please raise your hand if you'd like to come off mute and either ask a question or if you have a comment. I gotta have a first taker. Come on. Keith.
Well, I think I read somewhere, maybe it was Crucial Conversations or another similar book, that if everybody had the same exact perspective and all the same information, that there would never be any disagreement. And that when you have disagreements on a team, one of the ways you can get through them is to make sure everybody's information is in a shared pool, so that you're all working from the same sort of baseline. And I think this is a really great tool to help do that. So thanks for sharing this, Gift. This is really helpful.
For those of you in product, you may know Jeff Patton. Jeff is a friend of mine. He's wonderful. He wrote this fabulous book on story planning and things like that. He has this fabulous cartoon. He's got these three people standing in front of a whiteboard, and they've got these thought bubbles in their head. And one person's thought bubble is a circle, one is a square, and one's a triangle. But while it's just thought bubbles, they go, "Oh, I'm glad we all agree." But when you actually, his point is that if you actually write this stuff down, get it in front of you, put it on the whiteboard, then people realize, oh, we thought we were aligned, but we actually weren't aligned. And this tool is the same thing, right? It's just expose it, get it out there, make it concrete. Anyone else? Rachel.
Hello. I really love this framework. I think it's a great approach to these discussions. Um, in in the past, I've struggled with CEOs that tend to rabbit hole down like specific assumptions or like specific calculations, and then the discussion doesn't end up like yielding as much value because you're kind of going down those paths and et cetera. So I was wondering if you've experienced that and if you have any strategies for addressing it.
Well, there is a danger of exposing the model uh, too often, too early, or too much. It's like with a board. I will, I always say boards like to communicate in spreadsheets, not screenshots. And so you're often, as a CPO, you're often doing a lot of analysis data and showing finances and metrics and things like that. But you usually want to be presenting at a sort of high level, a summary level, right? Getting into the model too early makes people's eyes bleed. And you're right, you can get distracted and rabbit hole. And so designing your summary for a good conversation and a good decision that's an important design step that you have to go through. There's often, a few footnotes that you want to call out, a few things like there are these two really important inputs, right? These, like, I've got a whole model behind this, but the two key numbers that are going to matter for us are how many leads are we driving and what's our conversion from trial to paid. Like, there's a lot of other stuff there, but those are the key things that matter. Here's why, and let's focus on those two numbers. And so if you don't show the whole thing, but you steer them to the most important numbers, that can cut that off. Now, you may still end up needing to go into the model, especially if you're, having a one-on-one session with the CEO and they're detail-oriented and they want to dive in. That's not necessarily a terrible thing. If that really is an important number and they've got a strong opinion on it, then it's a good thing you talked about it. If it's not that important a number, frankly, you could probably just go with the data point. Unless you have a lot of data that says that that's wrong, you might just go with their data point and say, whoop, hold on a second. I didn't think anyone else could share. There we go. Sorry, DP. But anyway, did that help, Rachel? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a delicate dance, but
It's a delicate
yeah.
dance. And it's the same thing how if you show the results too early, sometimes people can work backwards from the results they believe are going to happen. That's not necessarily a reason to not show the results early, because you are trying to show the connection between here are the inputs and here are the results. And that's just part of the discussion. And so you get better, I think, at steering those discussions. And sometimes you decide this is not a battle I want to fight right now. A lot of times you decide this is certainly not a battle I'm going to fight with a group of people. We're going to have a one-on-one conversation and talk about this outside of this room. But yes, that can certainly happen. But at the end of the day, certainly if it is a CEO, ultimately as a CPO, it's one of the annoying things about being a chief product officer is you don't get to make the final say. You have a lot of responsibility over a lot of the organization, but they get to make the final say. And if they do decide to make a call, disagree and commit's the way you got to go.
Well, thank you.
Rachel, other Rachel, go ahead, Rachel.
To build on that, I think, when you have a lot of data that leads to you building those assumptions, how do you avoid the rabbit hole, or should you avoid the rabbit hole? Like, should you get the references all in place? Because that can muddy the conversation as well. Meaning, do we agree on these? Are these precedents relevant or things like that? How do you go about that?
Yeah. Obviously, the more informed your models can be based on highly predictive data, highly historical data, the better, right? But oftentimes what's happening here is you are guessing about the future, and what's going to happen in the future may not be what has happened in the past. So you got to be a little skeptical about your data. It's the same thing that I just said, and that as you're creating these models, and this is also why I love building them from a blank spreadsheet, what you're trying to understand are what are the key inputs here. You may have a ton of variables in here, but there's probably only a few levers that are really important and are risky at the same time, right? That's what we're always thinking about. What's important and risky. And so that's what you want to highlight and call out. And I think it's fair as you're having a discussion. Remember, this is a tool for a discussion. This is a tool for alignment. It's not that the model tells you the answer. It's a tool. It's just there to help you as a group make a more informed and better decision. So don't put more weight on it than that. It's not truth, right? The truth is going to be what happens in the future. It's a tool. But you could say, we have high confidence in this number. We've got low confidence in this number, right? And this is where building scenarios into models can be really useful. As I say, you don't want to go you can build the most complex model known to man. Isn't necessarily going to make for a better decision, but building scenarios in so that you think, there's this huge range between a 5% conversion rate and a 30% conversion rate. Like, okay, let's say we don't know who's right on that. So let's play out what those numbers are. Let's look at what those mean. And then we can kind of go, all right, like this rough circle of outcomes is where we think this is going to land. How does that affect what we decide? Yeah, but knowing your confidence on your inputs based on your data is powerful. And when you go into those conversations with a fellow C-suite member, or if you're more junior and with someone more senior, because you could use this tool very effectively as a more junior product manager. Actually, you'll impress people by doing this. Knowing where the inputs come from, and how confident you are will just make you sound professional. We got time for one more question or comments from anyone before we break. Anyone else? Got a shy group. All right. Well, made it to the bottom of the hour. If you do have questions, you can find me on LinkedIn. You can send me an email at gift.constable@gmail.com. I am going to, I will paste in, one sec, I will paste into chat a link to just that little mini model if you're curious about it. There that is. And thank you for joining me today. As I said, I do have an upcoming financial fluency class. And if you're interested in that, you can find me on Maven. But feel free to reach out on LinkedIn, and I appreciate your time today. Thanks so much, and we'll end it here.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ian.